Hello, perceptive Scorpio. Before you assume August is simply another month filled with promises, pause for a moment. What makes this month feel extraordinary may have far less to do with what arrives from the outside, and far more to do with what refuses to stay hidden any longer. You probably heard that August is supposed to be one of the brightest chapters of the year, but broad predictions often sound comforting because they could belong to anyone. This time, the invitation is far more personal. August may bring you face to face with something you've kept beneath the surface for so long that it almost feels like part of who you are. Rather than offering easy answers, this month seems to invite a quieter kind of discovery, one that unfolds beneath appearances, where lasting change usually begins long before anyone else notices it. Like water slowly reshaping stone, the most meaningful transformations often happen in silence, long before they become visible on the surface. Scorpio has a remarkable gift for holding steady when emotions run deep. Even when waves are crashing beneath the surface, you know how to present calm, strength, and certainty to the world around you. Many people mistake that composure for an absence of struggle, never realizing how much inner discipline it takes to remain so steady. You have learned to observe before reacting, to absorb before revealing, and to protect what matters most until you feel certain it is safe. That ability has protected you more than once, but this month seemed to shine a quiet light on the cost of carrying everything alone, not as a punishment, but as an opportunity to ask whether the walls that once kept you safe are still serving the person you've become. By the time this reflection settles in, you may discover that what looked like caution was often something else entirely. Sometimes what feels like strength is simply familiarity, a pattern you practiced for so long that you've forgotten it was ever a choice. People often imagine that a great month arrives with unexpected opportunities, exciting news, or visible signs that everything is finally working in your favor. Yet for Scorpio, the deepest changes rarely begin that way. The most meaningful breakthroughs tend to happen beneath the surface, in places no one else can see. Imagine an ancient chamber hidden beneath solid stone. From above, everything appears untouched, but inside are shelves lined with memories, promises, fears, and truths carefully sealed away. You've spent years protecting that hidden place, convinced that not everything should be opened. Some doors remain closed because they guarded painful memories. Others stayed locked simply because opening them would require acknowledging emotions that never found the right moment to be expressed. Over time, the chamber became so familiar that protecting it stopped feeling like a conscious decision and became part of the way you understood yourself. That instinct has given you resilience, and it deserves respect. Few people know how to endure uncertainty with the quiet determination that you do. Your presence often feels steady because you've learned how to carry storms without letting them spill into every room you enter. Others may never realize that your silence has often been an act of protection rather than distance, a way of making sure your inner world never became someone else's burden. You have often believed that if you could contain the intensity yourself, those you cared about would never have to carry it. But every strength asks something in return, and eventually even the strongest door begins to feel heavy when it is never opened. The question is no longer whether you've kept those hidden rooms secure. The question is, what has been waiting inside them all this time, patiently hoping that one day you would feel safe enough to enter without fear. Sometimes the greatest burden is not what you've locked away, but the constant effort required to keep every door closed. Here's where the conversation becomes less comfortable. Every emotion pushed aside because it felt too risky, every truth left unspoken because it might reveal too much. Every wound covered before it had a chance to heal has slowly become part of a silent weight you carried without noticing. There is no warning when this happens, no obvious moment that tells you you've taken on more than you were meant to hold. The accumulation is gradual, almost invisible, until carrying emotional weight begins to feel as ordinary as breathing. You adapt to it so completely that you stop questioning whether life was ever meant to feel this heavy. Yet the signs have likely appeared in quiet ways, a tiredness that lingers without explanation, a sudden need to withdraw, or an intensity that seems larger than the moment itself. These reactions are rarely about the present alone. More often, they are echoes of everything that was postponed rather than processed, quietly asking for the attention they were denied. These moments are not random. They are gentle reminders from the parts of yourself that have waited patiently to be acknowledged. Picture a deep underground river, sealed beneath layers of stone. From the surface, the ground appears perfectly solid, but beneath it, the water keeps moving, pressing against every barrier placed in its way. It never stops searching for a path forward because movement is part of its nature. The pressure is not there to destroy what you built. It exists because life naturally seeks movement, and anything held back for too long eventually asks to be felt. Water does not become weaker because it changes direction. It simply finds another way to continue flowing. In much the same way, your emotions have never disappeared. They have only been waiting for a safer path through which they can finally move. The more tightly emotions are contained, the more quietly they shape your thoughts, your relationships, and the choices you make without even realizing why. Perhaps the hardest realization is recognizing that many of these walls were built by your own hands. No one chooses them lightly. At some point they offered safety, teaching you that staying guarded felt wiser than risking disappointment, betrayal, or exposure. They were built one experience at a time, each stone laid with understandable reasons. Every difficult lesson seemed to confirm that caution was the wiser path, until protection became almost instinctive. Over time, that instinct became so familiar it stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like your identity. Protection slowly transformed into habit, and habit quietly became a place where growth struggled to reach. What once served as shelter gradually became a place you rarely left, even after the danger had passed. The hardest part is that familiar places often feel safer than healthy ones, even when they no longer allow you to keep growing. What if this August invited a different question altogether? Not whether you are strong enough to keep holding everything together, but whether your strength has become tied to never letting anyone see the whole truth, including yourself. Sitting with that question may feel unsettling, yet there is something quietly liberating about it. Real honesty often begins long before anything changes on the outside. It begins the moment you stop defending patterns that no longer reflect the person you're becoming. It begins when curiosity replaces self-protection, even if only for a moment. If you've recognized even a small part of yourself in these reflections, perhaps it's because some part of you already senses that this month asks for more than patience. It asks for the courage to loosen your grip just enough to discover that real strength has never depended on controlling every hidden corner of your inner world. Instead, it grows from trusting that what is genuine can remain strong even when it is finally allowed to be seen. And perhaps that is the quiet promise hidden within this month. Not that it will change who you are, but that it may help you remember the parts of yourself that had been waiting beneath the armor all along. Tell me in the comments, when was the last time you gave up something important just to avoid disrupting someone else's peace? This invisible debt we've been talking about has a strange way of collecting interest, not in money, but in exhaustion. You've probably experienced it before, leaving what should have been a pleasant evening feeling completely drained without really understanding why. It wasn't the event itself that wore you out. It was every feeling you buried along the way, the opinion you chose not to share, the moment you wanted to leave but smiled and said, "It's still early. Let's stay a little longer." Each of those moments may have seemed too small to matter on its own, but emotional fatigue is rarely created by one dramatic event. More often, it is built from countless tiny compromises that quietly accumulate until carrying them becomes second nature. Every unspoken thought becomes another quiet payment made with the most valuable resource you have, your own energy. The difficult part about a debt no one can see is that it appears limitless. You can keep paying it for years without realizing how much it has taken from you, until your body begins asking for what your mind has ignored. It may show up as exhaustion that sleep can't fix, irritation that feels far larger than the situation, or a sudden desire to disappear from everything for a while. Sometimes it even appears as a feeling that you become disconnected from yourself, as though you spent so much time managing everyone else's comfort that you've forgotten what your own peace actually feels like. None of this is a sign of weakness or failure. It's simply what happens when years of hidden emotional costs finally become too heavy to carry all at once. And when that moment arrives, the people around you are often surprised. They say, "But you always seemed so calm. I had no idea it affected you this much." They couldn't have known, because you never allowed them to. Every silent sacrifice also concealed another piece of your truth, even from yourself. Little by little, you became so practiced at minimizing your own needs that you stopped noticing how often you were placing yourself at the very end of your own priorities. Now, picture that familiar scale once more. From a distance, it appears balanced. It still moves. It still seems to function. Yet anyone who looks closely can see that one side has been carrying more weight all along, constantly working to compensate for an imbalance that never truly disappeared. You've called this compromise for so long that it began to feel natural, but real compromise is a choice made freely, not one driven by fear. A healthy balance allows both sides to exist honestly. What you've been living with is something different, a quiet adjustment that asks one side to carry more simply, because it has learned not to complain. Most of the time, what you've been protecting wasn't harmony. It was the fear of discomfort, the fear of disagreement, the fear of the silence that sometimes follows an honest no. The fear that someone might step away simply because you revealed what you truly thought. What appears generous on the outside can quietly become fear wearing the mask of kindness. The difficult truth is that when fear disguises itself as generosity for long enough, it becomes almost impossible to recognize where compassion ends and self-abandonment begins. Where did that fear begin? No one may have deliberately placed it there, but somewhere along the way you learned that disagreement carried a price. Maybe it came from childhood, when conflict was followed by cold silence. Maybe you simply noticed that people who expressed themselves too openly often ended up isolated. However it started, the lesson became automatic. And habits like these don't ask for your permission each day. They simply repeat themselves until life, or perhaps a month like this one, gently invites you to question whether they still belong. The patterns that once protected you deserve understanding, but they also deserve to be examined. What helped you survive one chapter of life may quietly prevent you from fully living the next. There is a compliment you've probably heard many times. You're so easy to get along with. You're never difficult. You always understand everyone. It sounds kind and perhaps it even feels rewarding. But look a little deeper. Sometimes those words also mean you become known for asking very little, needing very little, and fitting yourself into whatever space remains after everyone else's needs have been met. Without realizing it, you may have begun measuring your worth by how little inconvenience you created for others, rather than by how honestly you were living. Imagine an actor who never removes the costume after the performance ends. They eat in it, sleep in it, live in it, until eventually they struggle to remember the face underneath. The same thing can happen when you spent years earning approval for a version of yourself designed to make everyone else comfortable. The authentic self doesn't disappear, it simply waits quietly beneath the role, hoping for the moment you'll recognize it again. It waits patiently, not with anger, but with a quiet hope that one day you'll realize you no longer have to perform in places where genuine connection was always possible. Perhaps that is the real invitation this month offers. Not to wait for the perfect time to become more honest with yourself, but to realize that the perfect moment rarely arrives. Growth usually begins in imperfect conversations, uncertain decisions, and small acts of truth that feel uncomfortable at first. What you've been searching for has never been another way to please everyone. It has been a way back to yourself. Every small moment of honesty becomes a step toward reclaiming parts of yourself that were never truly lost, only set aside for the sake of keeping everything around you peaceful. Here's something you may never have considered. Your indecision was never about not knowing what you wanted. More often, it came from knowing exactly what you wanted and worrying about what might happen once you admitted it aloud. Think of a suspension bridge stretching across deep water. People notice how much it sways in the wind, but they rarely think about the massive foundation hidden beneath the surface that quietly supports every step above it. The movement above draws everyone's attention, while the quiet strength below remains almost entirely unseen. For so long, you've been that hidden foundation, carrying the emotional weight of others without expecting anyone to notice. You learned to remain dependable, even when you yourself felt uncertain. People leaned on you because you rarely gave them a reason to believe you needed anyone in return. But there is a quiet loneliness in always being the one who holds everything together. Everyone assumes you'll keep standing. Very few stop to ask who supports you when your own strength begins to feel stretched. Perhaps the greatest lesson waiting for you now is realizing that allowing yourself to be supported doesn't diminish your strength. It simply reminds you that even the strongest foundations were never meant to carry every weight alone forever. There is a particular kind of loneliness that few people ever speak about. The loneliness of being the one everyone trusts, while feeling that very few truly know you. People rely on your strength because you've shown them, time and again, that you can carry difficult things without breaking. They see your resilience, your calm presence, your ability to remain composed when others become overwhelmed. Yet almost no one pauses to wonder what happens when the foundation beneath your own feet begins to shift. The stronger you appear, the less often people think to ask what you're carrying beneath the surface. In many ways, your strength has become so familiar to others that they mistake it for something effortless, never realizing how much quiet energy it takes to remain that steady. What if August invited you to stop believing that you must always be the one holding everything together? What if the steadiness you spent years offering everyone else finally became something you allowed yourself to receive? You've probably answered, "I'm fine," more times than you can count, even when the truest response would have been, "I'm not sure." Perhaps you've even convinced yourself that uncertainty should stay hidden until you've already solved it on your own. But that uncertainty was never a weakness. It was the first honest crack in the armor you've worn for so long. The first sign that a part of you was ready to live without carrying every answer before asking for understanding. This month doesn't arrive to expose your vulnerabilities for the sake of discomfort. Instead, it quietly draws your attention toward the places where protection has slowly become isolation. Imagine a lantern hidden deep inside a cavern. For years, it has illuminated the passages that keep others from losing their way. Yet its own chamber has remained almost entirely in shadow. No one questioned whether the lantern also deserved its own light. It simply continued shining outward because that had become its purpose. After enough time, even the lantern itself begins to forget that there are walls around it, waiting to be seen, understood, and warmed by the very light it has always carried. But something changes when the lantern is finally turned inward. It doesn't stop guiding others, nor does it become any less generous. It simply reveals that its light was never meant for one direction alone. You begin to see the forgotten corners of yourself with the same compassion you've so freely offered everyone else. Memories, emotions, and hopes that have quietly waited beneath years of self-control begin to come into focus without demanding to be fixed all at once. And in that moment, an unexpected truth begins to emerge. Helping others from a place of freedom feels entirely different from helping, because you're afraid of what might happen if you step back. One is an expression of love. The other is often an attempt to outrun fears that were never fully yours to carry. For a long time, emotional control may have looked like strength, keeping everything contained, revealing only what felt safe, convincing yourself that carrying every burden alone was simply who you were. You became skilled at reading the emotional climate around you while quietly setting your own feelings aside, believing they could wait for another day. Yet there is an important difference between choosing privacy and believing that vulnerability is too dangerous to survive. One creates healthy boundaries. The other slowly builds walls so thick that even your own heart struggles to reach you. When protection becomes your permanent way of living, it quietly begins protecting you from the very closeness, healing, and connection you've been longing for. That realization marks the true turning point this month, seems to bring into focus, not because the calendar itself creates change, but because something within you may finally be ready to question patterns that have gone unchallenged for years. Growth rarely begins with dramatic revelations. More often, it starts with a quiet willingness to ask whether the habits that once protected you are still allowing you to live fully. Sometimes, the greatest transformation begins with a single honest observation. This kept me safe once, but does it still belong in the life I'm trying to build now? Questions like that rarely arrive with noise. They arrive gently, asking only to be considered. And then comes perhaps the simplest, yet most difficult moment of all. The hidden door you sensed was always there. It was never locked. You simply weren't certain what would happen if you stepped through it. Beyond that doorway isn't a completely different life. It's the possibility of making choices because they genuinely reflect who you are, not because they preserve an image of strength you've spent years maintaining. It's the quiet freedom of no longer measuring every decision by whether it keeps everyone else comfortable, but by whether it keeps you connected to your own truth. That step can feel unsettling. Emotional defenses built over a lifetime don't disappear simply because you recognize them. They soften gradually, one honest conversation, one quiet admission, one act of trust at a time. Some days the progress feels obvious. Other days it may seem as though nothing has changed at all. But healing rarely moves in a straight line. This isn't about becoming less discerning or abandoning the instincts that have protected you. It's about discovering that openness and wisdom can exist together without canceling each other out. You don't have to choose between being strong and being genuine. The deepest resilience often comes from allowing those two qualities to stand side by side. Perhaps that is why August feels so meaningful. Not because it promises effortless blessings, but because it creates the conditions for a different relationship with yourself. Instead of measuring strength by how much you can endure in silence, you begin measuring it by your willingness to let authenticity replace constant control. You become less interested in appearing unshakable and more interested in feeling fully alive. The deepest transformation doesn't ask you to become someone new. It invites you to stop hiding the person who has been waiting beneath every layer of protection, quietly trusting that one day you would be ready to meet yourself without judgment. When enough of those hidden walls begin to soften, something remarkable happens. The emotional current that once felt trapped starts flowing again. Energy that was tied up in guarding every vulnerable place slowly returns to you, bringing a sense of peace that doesn't depend on always staying in control. You begin noticing moments of ease that once seemed impossible, conversations that don't require constant self-monitoring, decisions that feel lighter because they come from honesty rather than fear. It isn't dramatic and it doesn't happen overnight, but it is real. Like water finding its natural course after years of being held back, your inner life gradually begins moving with less resistance. Perhaps this is the true gift August offers Scorpio. Not unexpected luck arriving from the outside, but the rare experience of discovering that the safety you search for has never depended entirely on keeping your heart sealed away. There is no shortcut that erases years of habit in a single moment, yet every meaningful transformation begins somewhere. This month may simply offer the quiet invitation to stop asking permission to trust yourself, to stop mistaking constant vigilance for strength, and to recognize that your greatest power has never been your ability to hide your depths. It has always been your ability to transform them. And once that transformation begins, it doesn't ask you to become less of who you are. It simply allows every part of your strength to grow from truth instead of fear.